Hi, this is the voice of Heidie Calero with another economic capsule in the voice of Heidie Calero. It's a consumer in turmoil globally. Inflation is the number one topic of discussion in all families, in all households, and Puerto Rico is no exception. We are in that illustrious company. So what I'm going to analyze for you is some of the components to illustrate that inflation is much more than just the average consumer price index that we are used to following in terms of the trends upwards or downwards. Well, as of April of 2022, compared with April of 2021, in Puerto Rico, the consumer price index increased 6.1%. Doesn't look that much, but hey, compared to maybe 1.5% or 2%, which we were used to before COVID and even during COVID, now it looks pretty hefty. And in the US in May, they announced that the consumer price index increased to 8.6%. So the Federal Reserve is just putting stepping on its brake because it wants to cool down the US economy so that demand will soften and that will give some respite or relief to the increase in prices. But you know that is a two-edged sword. As interest rates increase, you could also send the economy into either a soft landing or into a tailspin of a recession if the interest rates are just escalating too heavy, too fast, and too high. Well, let me share with you what was happening in Puerto Rico in food prices in April 12, 2012 compared with 2011, which is this graph, compared with the next graph, which is both together, which is April 22 versus April 2021. The segment which is in blue is fats, oils, and dressings. In April 12 compared with April 11, we had 5.5% increase, and the information, the increase in the CPI was only 2%. If we were looking at eggs, they were not increasing in price. On the contrary, price was declining by 9%. Other meats were increased 3.9%. Poultry was 9.1%, which is the mustard color in that pie. And fish and shellfish, the green segment, increased by 4.3%. Let's move 10 years forward. April 2022 compared with April 2021, which is this graph that you are looking at, and now we are looking at double digits increases. Again, fats, oils, and dressings 24.7%. The eggs 17.2%. Other meats 15%. Poultry 14.8%. Fish and shellfish 12.9%. And within the consumer price index in Puerto Rico, which in April was 6.1%, food, these components of food represent a weight of 23%. The other increases in that heavy double-digit weights are transportation, which is gasoline, and of course, housing. Let's look then at all of this, since the US says, hey, 8.6% is just too high in inflation in prices. What to do? Well, Federal Reserve, the few tools that they still have is to increase interest rates, as did Paul Volcker 20 years ago, putting the brake. But he did put it very quickly and very steeply. Chairman Powell is trying to do it more gradually, but nonetheless, this third increase was 0.75 basis points when they had announced before that it would be 0.50 basis points. But it seems that prices are escalating faster than the Federal Reserve, and so they want to cool down the economy. And look at the Treasury, the U.S. Treasury bond, 10-year note, Treasury bond, 3.3% as of June of 2022. Since January of 2022, notice how which is that vertical line that you're seeing there. Notice how the curve has increased steeply. Compare that with what is happening in the stock market, because everything has consequences. Increases in the interest rates not only affects you and I in terms of our budgets, but it definitely affects the financial markets. And this is the S&P 500. Again, let's look at what has been happening since January of 22. The correlation is almost perfect. As interest rates rose, the financial markets were already, in terms of the stocks, already going down. And as of June 2022, 3,749.6 points in the S&P. That's almost just shy of 500 points in January of 2020, just before the pandemic. Now let's look at what can Puerto Rico do, because all these increases and all these interest rates, it's going to impact. It is already impacting Puerto Rico. Mortgage rates have already gone up. Credit cards are going up. Personal loans will be going up. Business loans will be going up, because the financial system, which right now only has 3 local banks compared to 14 when we had it back in the 1970s, well, definitely this is a very concentrated financial market. Well, let's look at what can Puerto Rico do, especially since food prices are in such double digits, and it's really the insurance that Puerto Rico can have if we had agricultural production. Let me show you this last graph. Back in 1952, agriculture, gross domestic product of agriculture contributed 20% of gross domestic product in 1952. That's the year of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, and it was just a turning point in terms of our economic growth and economic development. And compare that with 2020. Agriculture now contributes 0.6% to gross domestic product. So we did increase manufacturing, we did grow enormously, but at what price? Price of agriculture went down. Same thing with the jobs contributing to total employment. It's meager. We need to go back to agriculture, because we need production, local production in Puerto Rico. And look at the value of production. Here we are comparing 2018 with 2012. The magenta bars are 2018 and the blue bars is 2012. And this is the value of agricultural production. Some of the main agricultural products at the bottom of this graph is milk. Milk production back in 2018 is $172.2 million, whereas in 2012 it was $189.4 million. And this is not because of deflation, this is because lower production. Plantains, $42.3 million the value of production back in 2018, now compared to $80.5 million in 2012. Look at poultry and poultry products. It was $20.1 million in 2018 compared to double that, $40.4 million just 6 years ago. And so I think Puerto Rico needs to focus again in terms of its public policy and in terms of its economic growth plan. We need to pay attention to agricultural production, because it's part of the national safety that Puerto Rico has. This is an island, it's surrounded by water, and unless we have some production to at least cover some of the consumption in Puerto Rico, otherwise we will continue suffering the same problems that we are facing now. Our inflation is imported, and transportation costs, because this is land cost together with air and sea transportation. It's just escalating even more, the cost of all these products. And I'm only mentioning food, but that includes other merchandise. Most of our consumption of durables and non-durables, it's imported. So whatever is happening out there, Puerto Rico imports it. Maybe some of the services, health services, are mostly locally, but hey, half our consumption is consumption of durables and non-durables, and the other half maybe or even less is services. So what can Puerto Rico do? Well, they started doing something maybe with the tax on gasoline part of that for the next 45 days, maybe just a sliver, maybe a few cents, but hey, who's looking? In terms of the gas, the gas at the pump, something is of a relief. Well, we have a sales tax on the food at restaurants. Let's give a relief to the consumer. The electricity, the utility rates are just going to go up. Nobody is really paying attention, auditing and overseeing this private company that just continues to increase its salaries and not doing the capital improvements. We need to move to renewable energy. Doesn't happen like this in a moment, but we have to start somewhere. Same thing with the water bill. The executive director of the Puerto Rico Aqueduct and Sewer Authority mentioned just last week that 60% of all the processed water in Puerto Rico is either lost, stolen, or it's just going out. They are not charging for it. Yet every July we have increases in water rates. Who is taking care of us taxpayers, of us consumers? We need this government to pay attention and give us some relief, because this inflation is not going away anytime soon. Until the next capsule, don't forget to give us a like in the voice of Heidie Calero, to subscribe as well, and remember that the economy is all of us. Thank you.